Good morning. Welcome to worship this Sunday of Memorial Day weekend and this Sunday of Pentecost as well. You'll see our colors, our decorations have changed. Lots of red, lots of fire, dove reference there. And we'll hear once again our Pentecost story. Actually, two Pentecost stories today. One is a very loud, visible, public display, and one is a quiet, more intimate setting as well. Both show the gift of, and remind us of the gift of the Holy Spirit. I'll actually be preaching on a passage from our first letter to the Corinthians, though that will be my focus for the message today on this Pentecost Sunday. There was a livestock fair in England in 1906 where they held this competition. And they asked people to guess the weight of an ox. Now, the crowd of 800 people that was there was a mix of farmers and butchers, people who you would expect would have a really good idea of how much an ox would weigh, that they would have this really accurate guess. But there were also kind of common people as well, right? People who were not necessarily in the livestock world who might guess the weight of an ox is anywhere from 50 to 10,000 pounds. You know, guesses that are just way too low, way too high. There's a man who was there by the name of Francis Galton. He had a theory that as of those 800 people, only a knowledgeable few would have an accurate guess of the weight of that ox. Everyone else, if you took the average of the crowd, everyone else would be way off. Now, Galton was a eugenicist. He believed that there were people who had a genetic intellectual superiority than others, so that might have influenced his theory. But when they did that test, the winner of the guess was a farmer, or the winner of who guessed the correct, or as close to the correct weight of the ox as possible, was a farmer. So he was an expert in the field, and he was 8 pounds off in his guess of what that actual ox was. But when you took the average, when Galton calculated the average of all the guesses, does anyone want to guess how close the average was? How far within the weight? 100 pounds off? The average was 100 pounds off? Anyone else? 1 pound. When you took the average of the whole field, the whole 800, the whole group was even closer than the most accurate guess, 1 pound off. And this is an example of a phenomenon called the wisdom of the crowd. It's replicated in other settings. The idea of it's been around even longer than just 1906. And it's been pulled into other fields as well, anywhere from guessing the number of jelly beans in a jar to how a candidate will perform in an election. But there's a couple quirks in this theory of the wisdom of crowds. One is this, that if people have the ability or the opportunity to collaborate, to talk about their guess beforehand, well, that tends to alter the process a bit. It creates the possibility for an opinion leader to emerge. And that opinion leader can become the center of gravity for everyone else's guess. So if the opinion leader is someone who is knowledgeable in that field, then the whole crowd's guess becomes more accurate. But the converse is also true. If the opinion leader is someone who has no idea, who is way off, then the whole group gets less accurate. The whole group goes astray. So the takeaway, if you will, is people can influence one another in ways that are sometimes helpful, but not always, right? It's an example where we could conclude from this that consensus doesn't always pay off. And social scientists have observed that when the independence of individuals is compromised, There might be some excessive conformity or a strong social influence. The wise crowd can become an irrational mob. And we've seen this in examples of stock market bubbles, right? Or political polarization as well. That when people are, that independence is gone, when there's less diversity in the crowd, that's a pretty bad thing, actually. Diversity is a interesting word right now. It's often under attack, it seems, in this particular climate. But researchers conclude that if social influence can be used in the right way, then we can actually improve our collective decision making. But when humans are involved, when there's this competition for power and control, how can we find out what that right way is to use our influence? And most decisions that we have to make, to be honest, are more complicated than just guessing the weight of an ox or the number of jelly beans in a jar. And when we're talking about our work as church, well, that independence component doesn't really fit, right? We value collaboration. The test, though, is do we value diversity? Because that's where this wisdom of crowd points us towards. It points us toward the value of diversity. And in his letter to the Corinthians, that's what the Apostle Paul is trying to communicate to them, to those believers in Corinth. His message to them is that there are a variety of gifts among you. It's the same Spirit. There's a variety of services that you do, but it's the same God who activates those. So his message is God gives diversity for the benefit of community cohesion. He's emphasizing that in all these gifts, wisdom, faith, healing, like this isn't an exhaustive list, but all of them are important. But none of them can really be raised up above the other. In this diversity, that is from within God. So God is a source of both diversity and unity. He's kind of pointing them back to, even though none of them were present, he's pointing them back to this Pentecost experience of the church, which was shared throughout the world, throughout the Christian world at that time. But it looked like the church in Corinth had recognized that there's a hierarchy of gifts. They valued some spiritual gifts over others, and it creates this false assumption that when it comes to the really, really important work of the church, the ability to do that work actually just rests in the hands of a capable few. And Paul is saying, no, that's not the case at all. But I wonder if at times we value diversity just when it's the right kind of diversity. Or just when that diversity leads us in a direction that we're okay with, a direction that we want to go. Other times, maybe not so much. When diversity leads to someone, having an opinion or lifting up something that I really don't like, I might not be able to accept that as much. I like to think that in this body, in this congregation, we do value diversity, but it's also an interesting season too, right? We're 1 week away from our annual meeting, and at this time we often look for leadership, people to step into leadership roles, looking for people to have those leadership gifts. So it might seem like, we're at a season where we're really valuing those gifts. And that might be the case, but the whole message here is that we can't have a uniformity of gifts. I think back to my camp counseling days when I first started training as a camp counselor, brand new to it. I had no idea what camp counseling was like, but it seemed really early on in my training that, there's this ideal camp counselor. It's someone who's vivacious, who's goofy, who plays the guitar, someone who can be everyone's buddy, maybe sometimes on the verge of trying too hard to be everyone's buddy. But that was my picture of the ideal camp counselor. But I quickly realized once we started getting weeks of, or campers started coming for weeks at a time, not all campers relate to that kind of counselor. right? We worked better when we were not all trying to be one thing, when we were each trying to be ourselves authentically, and when we were bringing out those authentic gifts in one another too. Because that's when it results in a stronger appreciation of each other and of ourselves. And maybe it's in this spirit that the Apostle Paul is trying to remind the believers that the strength of the Spirit working among them is in their diverse gifts. Out of that whole passage, I think this is kind of the center of what he's trying to say, what he's trying to communicate to them. To each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. And I think this really gives us something to set our compass to. It did for the church in Corinth as well. Set your compass to that common good. Now, even that can be a bit subjective, right? It's not like trying to find a true north, where if we all got our compass out, tells us where true north is, we're all pointing in that same direction. See, we all might have different ideas of what that common good is. Some might have a picture of the common good being a financially stable church or body, right? Some might think our common good is we all have this sense of belonging. We're all well connected. Well, these are all different ideas of what health looks like, right? Health has different components. We talk about mental health, physical health, emotional health. And I like to think we know what a healthy community looks like. When there's not a strong imbalance of power, power is pretty well spread out. People feel heard. There's no harmful gossip happening in little pockets. No undermining of decisions. We also should acknowledge that sometimes, every now and then, we get the idea that the common good is something that works for me. When the community is good for me, that's the common good being realized. Well, maybe. Not always, though. See, valuing diversity is a practice that helps us de-center ourselves. It encourages us to look around for the gifts of the Spirit present in one another, while also recognizing the Spirit gives to us too. It'd be interesting to do kind of a spiritual inventory, a spiritual gifts inventory to figure out or to imagine what people think those gifts that the Spirit has given them, what those gifts are. Because Paul is certain here that every one of you, everyone in that body has gifts. And in some ways, I think the gift of the Spirit at Pentecost looks a lot like the wisdom of the crowd. Right? Maybe not the independence part, because there's a sense of working together that we need to maintain. But here's the thing, we don't have to guess what the Spirit is up to, as if it were something so precise and singular, like the weight of an ox or the number of beans in the jar. We don't have to worry about that. But having life in the Spirit means accepting this ongoing invitation to appreciate diversity in our midst. And as we do so, hopefully we can recognize the strength of our varied gifts. That we're stronger when those are activated, when those are recognized together. And as we acknowledge these activated gifts, that is where we will find God helping us, guiding us in finding the common good. Thanks be to God.